the event flyer, which includes the full bios. I'm not going to read all the bios. I am just going to introduce. Hello? Can you put your phone on mute, please? So I'm just going to introduce Alan. Alan is the director and founder of TMGov. TMLU, as well as TMGov University, and he is he's also the founder of CHCI as well. Alan?
Yeah, so it's part of CHCI as well, sure.
Okay. So I'm going to let Alan out, and if you wanted to spend a couple minutes talking about, you know, yourself, and then start on your presentation. Who's hosting this, or should he say next?
Say next.
We're going to run the slides here, and all you have to do is say next.
Oh, okay, sure. No, there's a fair bit of animation, I thought, but so I'll say next whenever I need it. Okay.
Throw it over to you? Okay. Okay, Alan, please go.
Okay, can we put up the first slide? I still see a desktop here. Great. Yeah, I think it's the first one, yeah. All right, and we'll put it up on, okay. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Debbie and John. I appreciate the opportunity to talk today to the group. We're talking today, as everyone knows, about something called MOOCs, M-O-O-C. And as you can see here on the opening slide, a MOOC is a massive open online course. And they've been around for already about 7 years. So I'm going to just talk about what a MOOC is. First, I'll introduce myself if we can go to the next slide. As Debbie said, my name is Alan Squire. I call myself the Chief Learner at TMLU, which is a nonprofit organization focused on providing online education as well as traditional workshops and research around leadership and human capital management. But I'm also the director of TMGov, which is a government-focused MOOC, if you will, and a government-focused, massive, open, online course provider. And so I'm going to be talking about our experiences with TMGov primarily over the last year, from January 2014 to December 2014, which was really a pilot year for the program. So if you want to move to the next slide, John. Let's just look at what a MOOC is. Already, we've said it's a massive open online course. And you may as well just click through these various definitions, John. Yeah, okay. So we have a variety of examples here, Wikipedia, EduCons, and Oxford Dictionary. But there's very much a lot of consistency between them. If you look at those, you'll see that they all define a MOOC as an online course that's open to anyone who wants to participate and is generally free. Free is not absolutely necessary, but it is online, open to anyone who wants to participate. And I would say in most cases I've seen, they are free courses. They don't have to be taught live. They don't have to be presented in any particular format. They just need to be open. So fairly straightforward. The name really says it all. Okay, next slide. You can blame Canada a little bit for the origin. They started 6 or 7 years ago in 2008. If you click the next button, you'll see an arrow that goes around Edmonton, Alberta. Athabasca University started this with a course on connectivism and connective knowledge, which was actually taught to 25 tuition-paying students. If you click again, at the University of Manitoba, which is a little bit south of Edmonton, but still probably about 30 below today. At the University of Manitoba, on that day that they taught this first MOOC course, 2,200 online students, just from the random public, attended as well, and they paid nothing. If you click again, you'll see that the term massive open online course was termed by a professor, Dave Cormier, at the university. Whoops, if you go back one. the University of Prince Edward Island, which is that tiny little island you see in the other arrow. All of that happened in 2008. So that's where MOOC actually originates. Now, if you go ahead to today, you see that they're probably dominated by 5 or 6 or maybe at the most 10 organizations. I've got some of them here, the biggest. edX, for example, is a nonprofit. There's MIT, Harvard, Berkeley, and other sort of blue chip universities and colleges that have partnered to build edX, which is a MOOC. Udemy is a for-profit MOOC that's unaligned with any college or university. It's maybe the biggest. It has 22,000 courses. It claims more than 5 million students and 12,000 instructors. Anybody can build a course on Udemy, and then if they accept it, it goes into the catalog. Coursera is a for-profit as well, but it was founded by 2 Stanford University professors, and it provides courses through universities, a number of universities and colleges across the United States mainly, and 4-credit courses. Udacity is one of the most famous because it was founded by Sebastian Thrun, who many might have heard about. He's the guy at Stanford who's associated with the driverless cars, but he's also associated with online education. He's a real pioneer. The first 2 MOOC classes that Sebastian Thrun developed and led attracted 250,000 students between them. So really becoming massive, much bigger than the first ones taught at University of Manitoba. And now Udacity is affiliated with a variety of universities and colleges around the world and is moving towards college-accredited courses and degrees. And finally, the Khan Academy here is a nonprofit MOOC offering video-based learning. It's more of a tutoring site, and it's mostly used by high school students and college students to augment their learning. Now, if you just take these 5 MOOCs alone, they've attracted investment funding or donations, because some of them are nonprofit, of almost $500 million. So you can see that there's a lot of interest in where MOOCs are headed in the future. So if we go one forward, we'll take a look at why these a lot of attention is being paid to MOOCs. Back in maybe 2011, 2012, a lot of the originators or pioneers of MOOCs said that this would democratize education, that college-level courses taught by some of the best college professors in the world would now be available to anybody with an internet connection. So in theory, an impoverished teenager in a slum, let's say in Mumbai, could access the internet from an internet cafe, perhaps, and start taking courses offered by Harvard, Stanford, and MIT. And they can absolutely do that. So there was a lot of hope that this would, in effect, change the world through democratizing education. But what's actually happened is that most of the people who start the courses fail to finish them. And that's probably around 95 to 98% of all students. So 250,000 people take a course, and that's not uncommon now. Only a few thousand will actually finish that course and earn whatever certificate that might come with it. And most of these people, as you can see hopefully in this slide that comes from a recent article in the New York Times, happen to be white, sort of upper middle class or middle class American college-educated students. So even though a lot of people from around the world are taking massive open courses, the majority of people taking them, and especially the majority of people actually completing them, are from a very small demographic. And one of the reasons that is put forward for this is that the courses are difficult. They're college-level courses. And the only people capable of actually doing them online and finishing them are some of the best and brightest students who are already enrolled or have completed college-level courses. They already have a BA or maybe even a master's degree, and they're the ones capable of finishing them. That may or may not be. There's another school of thought that because most of the original concept of MOOC was something that didn't come with any kind of accreditation, that people would dabble in them, find out that it takes a lot of their time, and sort of drop out. That they're capable of finishing them, but there was really no reason to finish them because they didn't get any credit for doing so. And that has started to change. They're, supplemental and complementary to other forms of learning for sure, but most of the MOOCs that I showed you, the ones, the big ones, are starting to offer real credentials for their programs. And that's sort of where we come in at TMW on the next slide. TMW was launched as a pilot project for its first online course on January 7th, 2014, almost a year ago to the day. There was no budget for marketing or promoting the program, but we were able to recruit excellent instructors, people like Dr. Shockey from the USDA and Mika Cross, who's now at the Office of Personnel Management, and others from across various government agencies. We also hosted instructors from the private sector, and some of them are very well known, people like Dan Pink and Mike Abershoff, who are New York Times #1 bestsellers, and subject matter experts like Dave Ulrich, who is often considered the most influential human resources expert in the world. Courses on TMW focus on leadership and human capital management. They can be called MOOCs because they're open to anyone, even though we only actively invite government employees. Anybody really, theoretically, if they found the link, could attend. And we do find people from outside government who join these courses from time to time. They're also free, so they meet the definition. They're online, they're free, they're open to anyone. And anyone who completes or attends a full webinar course or takes a course online and passes a short test at the end earns a certificate of completion. So we're moving in that direction and did actually from the beginning try to offer some type of credential for completing the course. And if you can move to the next slide, you'll see the initial results from the pilot on the next slide. Okay, so right as of today, we have 82 on-demand courses available, 47 of which were taught live in MOOC style, massively open, throughout 2014 by over 50 instructors from across the federal government and some from the private sector. Almost 30,000 people registered for these courses, and almost 10,000 people followed through and attended the courses. 7,623 of which completed the courses and earned the certificate of completion. We had 2,121 people enroll for the on-demand courses, and we didn't really start the on-demand courses until late spring. And so they're starting to pick up. People are actually starting to prefer to do the on-demand courses as opposed to the live webinars because they have the flexibility and freedom to do them whenever they want. Our greatest participation so far is from the USDA, the VA, military, and you can read the rest, and that means over 500 students or participants are enrolled. And the USDA and Treasury have actually embedded or integrated some of the programs into their learning management systems. We've had a lot of good feedback, about 100 unsolicited endorsements, and many of those are posted on the site. So I would say that we've had a good deal of interest and success. If you go to the next slide, you can see, actually, can you go one slide further and then we'll come back to challenges? Sorry, I'm going to stick with challenges then. Just we can address challenges right now and come back to it. This is the order I had originally had it in, but I wanted to show just where we are now. I'll address this now. We are facing challenges in the pilot with awareness and marketing, so we didn't have, as I mentioned, any budget for that. We need to make more people aware of TMW and what it offers. We've given the real success we've had in people's initial reaction to it. We also need to figure out the focus. It could be that the idea of leadership and human capital management expands to any topic that's relevant to government. It could also be that we expand the focus to state and local government, foreign governments, or even nonprofits as well. So we think about certificate completion rates because, and I'll get to this in a moment, we need to boost the number of people who are actually following through and earning some type of credential from the time they invest in TMW courses. And then to continue TMW beyond the pilot, we need to figure out the the revenue. So if you can go one forward, just sort of, this is what individuals receive automatically when they complete a course. So the system generates a certificate of completion and then sends it to that individual by email. For program certification, which I'll explain in a moment, a hard version is delivered that includes endorsement and credits, actual continuing education credits from the Human Resource Certification Institute. We know that a lot of agencies are accepting these certificates of completion and program certifications as proof of learning, and they're entering those into the record on their learning management systems and individual learning plans. So we're seeing that happen quite a bit right now. Okay, next slide. What we'd like to do is expand the credentialing beyond the Human Resource Certification Institute, which you see in the top left here, to include others like the Project Management Institute, and they have the PMP, SHRM itself, which is a Society for Human Resources Management. Agencies within government like FEMA have a Master Exercise Practitioner for people who respond to crises. The AGA, I believe, is an accounting designation that's recognized by government, an association that offers continuing education, Microsoft Certified Professional. And there are literally hundreds of these offered by respected professional associations or bodies like the MCP that we could partner with to provide professional credits and continuing education for. Now, if we can go back, just I think the next slide is if you go back about 5 slides, I just want to come to our program certificates before we conclude. Yeah, right here. Whoops, next. Yeah. This is something that we did, I think that's important to show last year. We're building programs of study. What you see here are 2 programs that were offered last year. On the left is a certificate program in telework management. It was created and produced in partnership with Mika Cross while she was at the USDA and later the OPM. The program included 6 hours of interactive lectures involving more than a dozen instructors from across government and the private sector. And it was supplemented by about 15 to 20 hours of recommended reading and videos. On the right is a certificate program in personal financial management, which was led by Dr. Susan Shockey at the USDA. It was similar in length to the telework management program, and both of them required a passing mark of 80% on 30 exam questions that were presented throughout the courses. And those who pass the exams are eligible for a program certificate endorsed by the independent professional body Human Resources Certification Institute, who also awards continuing education credits to anyone who completes the program. And this is key. Even though we're nonprofit and we have sponsors who offset the cost of running PMWU, we charge a $99 fee for anyone who wants to earn their program certification and credits. And it only applies to those who actually pass. So there's no risk to anyone who pays the fee. But this is important too. About 3,000 people participated in one or more of the courses in these 2 certificate programs alone. Yet only about 100 completed one or the other programs successfully. And of those, fewer than 20 opted to receive the certificate and pay the $99. That's the same problem that most of the courses, the Coursera's and the Udacities are facing right now. And it's one of the key issues that we have to overcome to make these massively open online courses viable. And I think that's a real important thing to keep in mind. If we can go to the end now, I just want to say that, I'd be happy to answer any questions at the end of the session today. And I can also be reached by phone and email. I'd like to get your thoughts as well if you're willing to share them. And thank you for the opportunity.
We decided to have all questions at the end versus after each presentation. So, Rhonda, you want to go next? Okay, Greg?
Yep,
Okay.
Hi, I'm Greg Galiardi. I'm an instructor at the National Cryptologic School.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We're still missing some slides, though.
Still missing some slides.
Greg's up.
Slightly out of phase at the moment. That corrects everything. I'm from an instructor at the National Cryptologic School out of Fort Meade, and I'm also the head of the MOOC working group that the school has put together to take a look at how we want to incorporate MOOCs into our offerings. So I'm very excited to talk about this topic. I'm very enthusiastic about MOOCs in general. That may not come out as I go through the next slide. There are some challenges associated with integrating this into a training environment, and I'll talk about that a little bit. The first thing is that I guess to summarize what we're doing at the school with MOOCs is one word: exploring. MOOCs are a moving target at the moment. They are evolving, as Alan very aptly described. MOOCs have been around for a while. The primary purpose of the MOOC is to deliver low-cost, high-quality education to large numbers of people and allow them to absorb the information at their own pace. It is, as a tech guy, I generally get excited about tech, but in this case, it's not really technology that's the key here. It is the process by which that knowledge and education is put together and delivered using existing tools that are available on the internet. And so the initial courses that were put out there were largely professors videotaping themselves, putting out the videotape on the web and posting their homework assignments with it. And those early MOOCs made going to class seem like a wild party. It took a lot of discipline to sit down and make your way through those. And professors have taken the feedback associated with those MOOCs and have changed some of the ways that they are producing their MOOCs now. And it's an educational process for them as well as for the students. They're trying to figure out what is the best way to present information in a format that is easily digestible across the internet, especially when you don't necessarily have that face-to-face contact. So MOOCs are evolving. So what you're looking at today may not be what's out there next year, which may not be what's out there in 5 years. It may morph into something totally different. So we're taking a kind of a cautious approach and looking at it and saying, okay, where is this now? How does it fit with what we're doing, and how do we slide this into what we're currently offering? Secondly, MOOCs are not a silver bullet. Back in 2012 and 13, when MOOCs really started to make a splash in the news, the New York Times and The Economist had articles about how MOOCs were going to change the face of education and democratize education, as Alan talked about. Hasn't quite worked out that way. The low completion rates are a significant issue associated with that. So this is not something that's going to replace the existing schools. It is a good source of supplemental information. It is a good alternative to in-person classes when you cannot necessarily make it to those classes. But it's one piece of a much larger toolkit. And as a school, we need to take a look at how does that fit in, and how do we slide that in with our other offerings and make sure students are aware and take maximum advantage of it. So for us, that means that we need to integrate and coordinate the MOOC offerings with our existing offerings. One of the other new learning techniques that we're also heavily looking at is adaptive learning technology. And what that is a more personalized approach to learning, where you work with an instructor, you set out the goals of what you want to learn, and then the system tracks your progress and reinforces your learning over time so that you maximize your learning time on the system. That's also a very exciting area of educational technology. We're actually investing quite a bit of money in trying to figure out whether or not that's going to work for us. And a key piece of that, and both the adaptive learning and the MOOCs, a key piece is the assessment that comes afterwards. Because from an educator's point of view, you don't necessarily care where people learn. You care what they learn and what abilities they can demonstrate. So what becomes more critical is rather than sitting them in a seat and having seat time in a classroom, you want to know what do they know, what skills do they have, and what can they perform for you. So that becomes much more of an assessment-focused effort. Again, not something that the school is necessarily focused on from a career perspective. We focused on it from a course perspective. Did you learn what you were supposed to learn out of this course? But when you think about it in a larger sense, the purpose of taking that course is to advance a person's career. So,
Can you please put your phone on mute?
so assessments then becomes a much bigger piece that you have to look at, especially when people can go out and get training and education from different places. As Alan has stated in his presentation, this kind of a course requires very strong independent learning skills. It is something that not everybody has. As a school, we should probably look to developing that in our students from the get-go. Take any opportunity we can to reinforce the development of those skills, because if a student is able to learn on his own and independently look for and identify his gaps and fill those, that takes the burden off of us, gets them their education in a much more timely and effective manner, and then it becomes our role to facilitate that by providing them the opportunities to learn what they need. I have a fellow instructor who described some of the MOOCs as handing somebody a book, right? A MOOC is not a new concept. Textbooks have been around for a long time. They're available at the library. You can go buy a used one at a college bookstore, and you can sit down and make your way through a textbook and have the entire sum of the professor's knowledge right in front of you. Not many people do that. Not many people have the discipline to necessarily sit down and do that. MOOCs can be a very similar effect, and Alan talked about that. Half of the people that sign up for a MOOC never crack the course. Those that do may take a few of the lessons and then bail out. A very small percentage of people actually complete the course. So we want to look at ways to up that. By having people provide some commitment, paying for the certificate ahead of time, that significantly ups the completion. And that's something from a work perspective that you might want to consider. And Alan has already addressed the college graduate level work associated with the MOOCs. An interesting story, I was giving a talk about this to another group, and as part of an example, I put up an introductory programming course from a professor at MIT, and the only prerequisites were a reasonable aptitude for mathematics. Now, whatever an MIT professor defines as a reasonable aptitude for mathematics. There was somebody in the audience who had actually started that course, and he said that in order to finish it, he had to go find another course on mathematics, go through that, and then he was able to complete that course. So there is a bit of a unevenness in the level of the courses presented and the expectations of the professors of what the abilities of the students are. And that's something that you also need to take into consideration. Okay. So what are we doing at the school? Well, we're a very big organization. We have tens of thousands of people that we support. People within those organizations are already employing MOOCs, even though it's not officially through the school. And there are small groups of 4 or 5 people who are working through 1 or 2 courses on their own and working together to get through the material, to a large directorate that has decided it wants to use MOOCs in its professional health program, and they are starting to tell their folks, here's a list of approved MOOCs we'd like you to take a look at. There are professional development programs that have also identified MOOCs that they want their people to take. And that's where the school comes in, because at that point it becomes more of a high stakes issue. right? You have folks who are going to be going through a professional development program. They're required to take these courses. Now you have to be a little bit more circumspect about how they're going to complete those. So when this all started to pop out a couple of months ago, a working group was set up. And the first thing we did was say, let's take a look at what's there. People are taking MOOCs. That's fine. We took a look at our policy. We took a look at what MOOCs offered, and pretty much determined that if they're just going out to an external site like Coursera or edX, it's the same as external training, right? They would go to a corporate vendor and say, I want to take a course on X technology. A MOOC could essentially be the same thing. So our initial recommendation was that for externally provided MOOCs, it easily fits within our policy that says, if you want to take external training, here's how you do it. If you want to take a MOOC for college credit, that's slightly different because it requires a little bit more money and or time out of the individual's pocket or the government's pocket if the government is paying for it. But we also have a policy that covers that. How do you take after-hour college courses if you want to advance your career? So from the external point of view, we thought MOOCs very neatly fit into that category. Now, when you start to say, I want to use MOOCs as part of the development program, that's where it gets a little bit more interesting, because then you have to assure that people have taken the courses, that they've passed the assessments, and that they had the opportunity to spend the time on that. So for us, that became well, we would like to host the MOOCs on our own servers and keep track of what people are using. And you start to get into a whole new set of issues that I think we'll talk about on the next page. So our challenges and opportunities. First of all, if you want to bring in MOOC material, it is copyrighted, so you have to talk to the people. Some were very open and said, yeah, go ahead, pull in the information. I don't care how you use it. Others were, okay, if you're going to be using this in a professional environment, we'd like a little financial compensation for it. So then it's, who do you contract with? Do you contract with a professor? Do you contract with a school? Do you contract with a company like Coursera? Just some issues to be worked out. Then from a government point of view, once you've imported that course onto your platform, first of all, it's compatible. What changes do you have to make for it to fit on your IT equipment? How do you provide 508 compliance? If you have handicapped personnel that can't necessarily listen to the audio or watch animation on the screen and have a screen reader, how do you modify the courses to provide for those people? And last but not least, homework, right? On MOOCs, where you have a class where you go through, it's either peer graded or reviewed by somebody on the professor's staff. How do you do that if you're hosting that internally? Again, as a peer reviewed, you assign an instructor to go through the homework assignments. And again, if it's a high stakes, you need to have that feedback provided. So just not insurmountable issues, but just things to think about if you're headed down that particular path. Alan didn't explicitly say this, but it came out in his talk. There are an enormous number of courses out there. How do you pick which ones you want or which ones you recommend? Do you crowdsource it? Do you go to the people within your agency and say, hey, what courses have you taken? Which ones did you recommend? Why was it good for you? Or do you go out and search on your own? Or do you take a slightly different tact and go to the last bullet there, opportunities to work with academic institutions? Do you go to academic institutions and say, here's the curricula that we would like to give to our folks. Can you develop a MOOC that would meet this criteria? So then that becomes you get something that's custom made for you, as well as you can provide that to other agencies or organizations to use that information to advance older people as well. So the last challenge, Alan, I think has already addressed low completion rates, somewhere between 5 and 10% overall. If you get people to invest at least a little bit in taking the course, that can jump to as high as 90%. But you have to get them to make that commitment. Now, low completion rates is not necessarily a bad thing, and I'll say this from the perspective of on-demand learning. I may not need to take an entire course. I may need a specific piece of a course to accomplish a task that I am doing right now. So I sign up for the course, I watch 2 or 3 lessons, I get what I need to know out of it, and I dump out. Right? As long as the course is low cost and the information is freely available, that's not necessarily a bad thing. That is a cost-effective way for somebody to accomplish their job without having to invest a lot of time and money in a big block of training when they would only necessarily need a very little bit. Next steps for the school, we're starting to formalize our policy. The next hurdle we need to talk about is if you use a MOOC as a substitute for a prerequisite for another course that we teach, who evaluates that? How do you make sure that they're necessarily equivalent? We need to identify a process to create and potentially, to create, but to identify and potentially import courses for our use, and whether or not we want to modify those courses to be agency specific. We need to figure out the best way to integrate those MOOCs into our learning environment that we're currently host. And the way we're going to do that is we have a series of pilots that we are setting up from a group of 9 data science courses that is part of the professional development program, to a couple of networking courses that we have a very high demand for. So we're going to try and meet those by setting up some MOOCs and running cohorts of people through that. And we're going to metric that as much as we can and try and figure out what works and what doesn't work. Does it pay to start and end a class on a specific date? Is it better to have it open at all times and let the students police themselves or help each other as part of the class? Or does it pay to have a facilitator who is always available to help a student out as part of it? Those are all kind of the topics that we want to take a look at over the next year or so, and try and figure out what's the best way for our particular environment, and fit MOOCs into the larger perspective of video-based training, online training, adaptive learning, in-class training, external training, college courses. Where does it fit in that mix, and what's the proper way we integrate that? So a lot of work to do over the next year, but those are just kind of our thoughts on how we want to fit MOOCs into the larger picture.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Rhonda Jones, and I work for a court services and offender supervision agency. And I have a handout which will serve as my presentation. So I won't go really into the background of the agency, just to say that formally we are comprised of 2 entities. Today I will talk about the entity that we call CSOSA, that has about 850 employees. And so the way the whole discussion around MOOCs came about is that I'm responsible for executive training and development. And we recently revised our executive training and development policy. So our policy focuses on GS-14s, 15s, SESers, and those in supervisory status regardless of grade. So those are about 20% of our employees, so a little bit fewer. So we did a competency assessment based on OPM's executive core qualifications in the executive fundamental competencies, because we needed to get a feel for where our employees were, trying to get kind of a leadership pool in place. And so the question for us is, how might MOOCs be able to help us close some of our competency gaps? And right now, we're focused on leadership because we can get a handle on those employees, and then we'll look at it for all staff. So what I've done is just noted some advantages and disadvantages. And in speaking about MOOCs, I've taken some, primarily with Coursera. And there are some courses that are better than others, but some are true online courses and are interactive. You can get discussions, videos, quizzes, assignments, the whole deal. So for many of them, it's like taking a real course. As Greg and Alan mentioned earlier, they have evolved over the years. So for us, MOOCs come into play in working with our staff who are covered under the executive development policy, because not only do they take the competency assessment, but we work with them to do an executive development plan. So it's, all right, what are your career goals within the next 3 years or so, immediate goals, and then how are we going to help you enhance those leadership skills to make sure you get to where you need to be, which will ultimately help CSOSA achieve its mission and objectives. So when Greg was talking about adaptive technology, you know, that's pretty much me and one other person working with the person to figure out what exercises, and we're not just talking about, of course, you know, face-to-face training, online training, could be coaching, could be mentoring, could be anything. So how do MOOCs fit into that whole scheme? So some advantages for us, I think they've already been mentioned. We can easily augment our existing courses. There are many well-respected MOOCs, not just in the United States, around the world. So you can take classes from, the Hong Kong, Institute of Technology, wherever. We don't have to build the content. And for us, being a small agency, that's definitely an advantage. We aren't tied to one specific content provider, which is another advantage. And we don't have to worry about contracts if we consider this external training. And so our employees are registering on their own, basically you can go do it 24/7, 365 days a year. Courses are free or relatively inexpensive, depends whether you want that, some MOOCs call it a track, or, certain program certifications, as Alan mentioned. No additional agency software is needed from our point of view, because we're actually not looking to import it into our LMS. We're looking to incorporate, and I'll talk about what the difference is for us. So there's no additional technology needed. And staff can interact with others from around the globe. A lot of times, especially being a federal agency, we're a little insular. So we do training and we're with other federal employees. Okay, we have wonderful federal employees, but that doesn't give us the bigger picture. So being able to interact with people in Africa, Asia, wherever is a definite benefit. And there are no, obviously, on-site requirements. So some of the disadvantages we're looking at is we don't control the schedule of the courses. For most MOOCs, there are some that are on demand, and those offerings are becoming greater, but for some, there's actually a set schedule. So the course will be moderated by an instructor for only a certain period of time, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever it is. After that time, if you're enrolled, you still have access to the class, but your assignments aren't being graded or whatever. And so for those classes that aren't on demand, we obviously don't control the schedule. So how do we work that into executive training and development when we may not know when that particular class will be offered again? We don't own the content. Other class participants might not be in leadership positions. As Alan mentioned, he showed that demographic. I think the average age of MOOC participants was 26 years age. Now that's great to get that point of view, but when you have older employees who are interested in taking online training, they're just as interested in learning as everyone else, but you have a different dynamic. Most 26-year-olds probably wouldn't be in a GS-15 position or equivalent, so there's that issue. Materials not tailored to our specific objectives and needs. So do you use the whole MOOC class, or do you just use part of it, as Greg mentioned? And MOOCs are not conducive to everyone's preferred learning style. Greg mentioned this as well. One thing we're finding in doing the leadership competency assessments and working with our staff one-on-one to do those executive development plans, one of the things I always ask is, how do you prefer to learn? And I'm shocked, no matter what the age, a lot of people still say, I love face-to-face. They say, oh, online's good for some, but I need that discussion. And so just sending them off to take a MOOC may not be the best thing, at least for our employees. low completion rate, involuntary, and privacy concerns. So if you have employees that are registering for MOOCs, what data is being required? Normally it's name, address, and email, but you just want to make sure, because for Coursera, especially if you want to earn their, I forget what it's called, signature track or something, you have to sign up and they actually verify who you are by your typing pattern. There's actually software that you agree to, and you take a test. It learns your typing pattern, your pause, all these things, and they say, okay, that's Rhonda Jones's pattern. So that when you log in and take a class and complete the exams or whatever, that's the way they verify that that's you. If you want to do the certain signature track, I think they call it. If you just want to, go in and participate, do the assignments, and not earn that, you don't have to go through that. So our Office of General Counsel, is reviewing, okay, what happens to that data? Where is it stored? All that kind of stuff. So when I said the last point is incorporation into our LMS. So what we're looking at is not necessarily importing the MOOCs into our LMS, but somehow capturing what MOOCs our employees take and whether or not they actually complete it. And that may be, we're such a small agency, we're talking about 165 employees for right now when we focus on the executive group. That may be creating dummy courses, so to speak, and then having employees enroll, but they may be taking different MOOCs. But there's a dummy class in our LMS that records that. We were talking through that. So what else? So current path to implementation. Our directors, associate director and deputy director, are very big on the human capital office, the HR office, being creative and thinking outside of the box. So they're always pressing us to do new and great things. And so I have executive training and development, but we have a director for our training and career development center, which so she and I work very closely together, because right now we're just looking at executives, but we're looking at rolling this out to the entire agency, incorporating MOOCs into their training and learning as well. And so we're working very closely together. So this is the plan, to offer MOOCs as just one possible method of executive training and development. As Greg mentioned, it's not a silver bullet, it's just one tool in the toolkit. Pair MOOCs with blended learning practices, so in-person, experiential learning, hands-on projects, mentors. So it would be, as we go through the executive development plan for each employee, how they're going to strengthen their leadership skills. This is just one thing. Build SES support. So obviously we need to get our leaders on board for this new thing. If people hear the term MOOCs, they're not quite sure what that is. Some people have different opinions of online training still. And so we need our senior leaders to be on board and be champions of this. Build a marketing campaign. So I've already started thinking about articles to put in our employee newsletter. We videotaped a session that a coworker and I did on why do you need an executive development plan, and we started talking about things like MOOCs. So our employees can start hearing the term, they'll know what it is, so it's not a foreign thing to them. We're looking at conducting a pilot in a couple months, March, most likely with a cohort. So we'll start there, and we'll actually map out the course or courses that they will take. And it will be facilitated, so we won't say just go take this MOOC, we'll see you in 4 weeks when you finish it. But it'll be maybe a week after they start, we'll have them come together for a lunch or learn or a short period of time and say, okay, great, so how's it going, what are you learning? And then maybe 2 weeks after that, we actually have an agency project that they can start applying what they're learning to. So it's kind of like I don't want to say a separate exercise, but it's giving that face-to-face, getting them to come together so they don't feel isolated. And we're thinking of what goals we want to have. Of course, there's the employee goals as they improve their skills, but there's also the agency goals. We're investing time and effort into this. We want to make sure that we see an impact in agency performance. And so we need to set those goals in advance and figure out how we're going to evaluate them. And there are different ways to do that, different models for training, evaluating training. Keep abreast of current research on MOOCs. There's always stuff coming out. I just downloaded a report, and I can't remember who it was from. It was 2 days ago. It's like 200 and some pages, and it goes through the history of MOOCs and how they work and what's successful and what isn't. I haven't had a chance to read it yet. Like I said, it's 200 and some pages, but it's always evolving. And then revise as needed. The last thing before and I didn't put it up there, but I just thought about it as Greg was talking, is we're trying to get our employees to understand the changing nature of training and development, in that we're moving from the organization forcing employees to take training to employees driving their own learning and development. Now, the organization, the agencies, the SOSA is still responsible for having those opportunities available and giving you kind of a guide as how to get there, but ultimately it's more and more the staff members' responsibility to guide their learning. And so we're trying to figure out, like I said, how MOOCs play into the whole, into that process. So that's it for me.
Thank you. I guess we'll start in the room. Does anybody have any questions in the room for any one of the three speakers? Bob?
I think you just muted it.
Huh?
It looks like it's unmuted
Oh,
now.
okay.
I'm Bob Clark. I'm the communications chair for the SIG, and thank you to all of our speakers and participants. I had two questions. There were a number of references to the low completion rates for MOOCs. Can you compare that to the completion rates for other format online courses? Just, you know, we now know it's 5% less for MOOCs, but what is it for Skillsoft or whatever other onlines that you're doing? And the other thing was, as we were putting this panel together, we found a lot of interest as we talked to various people in various agencies who were interested in MOOCs, but very low expertise. And so I think that's one reason why we have a number of people attending. Is there a place in government where there is, where you can all share your knowledge such that each of you are developing expertise in MOOCs for your agencies, but then the agency sitting next to you doesn't necessarily get advantage of that? I mean, is there a place in, because I think of learning feeding into developments, feeding into personnel, as into, is there a place in OPM where this is like an online sharing place, so USDA can tell HHS, can tell FBI, you know, we found this was a really good course, or this is a really good, or, you know, sharing the kind of things you were sharing today.
Like a MOOCs user group? Okay. Did everybody on the phone hear the two questions?
Yes.
Okay, Greg, you want to start?
Well, I'm afraid I don't know the completion rates for Skillsoft. I'm sure we can take a closer look at that, but I know that there are a significant number of people who start courses but don't necessarily finish them. I'm not sure what that is. And part of that is sometimes the descriptions just aren't what you expect, and you go in thinking you're going to learn one thing and you get part way in and you go, this just doesn't meet my need. And that's part of the benefit of online training like that. You can stop at any point and say, okay, not getting what I want out of this, time to move on to something else. So I don't necessarily have the information on that. On the other question about, is there any place where the agencies are sharing information? None that I know of. I would be very interested in having something like that, participating in that conversation.
There is a platform that government agencies have. It's MAX. I'm trying to think of the real, full name. But I know the Office of Management and Budget, O&B, and some other agencies sponsored it, but it's where there are a bunch of discussion groups there that you can be part of. I'm part of the one for health and wellness and executive resources, and there has to be one, for learning and development. I'm not part of that group, but I could certainly take a look. So that's a great question. There is a platform already in existence, a free platform for government employees to exchange ideas. I don't know if anyone has started a discussion on MOOCs. I actually hadn't thought about that before. In reference to the completion rates of Skillsoft versus, or things like that versus MOOCs, I don't have that information for our agency either. I would probably bet that it's a matter of whether it's required or voluntary, because we have a lot of mandatory training of course, that's a federal agency. And so, you know, the completion rates for that are, you know, 100% if you want to keep your job. Versus, you know, and something that would be required for a formal leadership development plan that the agency is doing and moving a cohort through versus something, well, if you just want to learn a little bit more about X, Y, Z, go take that. I would think that the completion rates for any online training would be similar to MOOCs in that regard if it's not required, but I don't have the numbers for our agency.
Alan, any comment?
Yeah, no, not so much on whether there's a interagency MOOC, but or discussion more on the first question. You know, I just agree with Ron and Greg on several things. That, you know, we have to look at the quality of the course. You have to look at whether it's mandatory or not. I think Greg said if you have someone pay some money up front to earn the certificate, the rates go way up in terms of completion. To answer the question directly, and I don't know for sure, but I would be very surprised if you looked at just typical online courses that a person could take on demand that were not mandatory and did not result in a certificate or require you to pay up front. You'd probably find similar completion rates to, you know, what might be termed a MOOC. You know, and they'd probably be pretty low.
Anybody else in the room? Todd?
Have any of you been able to document any cost savings for using MOOCs? And if so, you know, what did that look like? And then along with that, so if you save money by using MOOCs, where are you reinvesting those cost savings? What's your next priority? You know, I'm curious about what the experience has been there.
That's one of the things we're planning on looking at as we start to run pilots.
Yeah.
Right now, from the external training point of view, again, that doesn't necessarily come through us. That goes through the personnel office and for budgetary reasons. The MOOCs are significantly less than external training. Now, how that money gets reinvested is up to the individual organization because they're the ones who pay for the external training.
Yeah.
So I don't have insight into that, but I imagine that they're investing it somewhere else.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It depends on the organization and what their needs are.
Okay.
We haven't started the pilot yet, so
Yes.
we don't have that data, but it's under my ways to evaluate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Alan, will you
Well, a
provide?
few years ago, I know that Fred Lang, who was then the CLO at Commerce, worked with a number of agencies to produce an online course around personal identifiable information that really a lot of people, I don't know if everybody in government had to take it, but an awful lot of people, it was mandatory for. And you could call that a MOOC because it was massive and open. You know, anyone could take it in any agency across government. In fact, many people were to take it. And he did a calculation, a proper return on investment calculation. And the savings were in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, and he has it documented. I can't pull it up here on my screen. I don't know exactly where it is, but I know that it exists. It's documented, and the savings were enormous.
I think one just observation is that, and Greg, I was interested when you mentioned more about adaptive learning, and there was some discussion too around everybody has a different learning style. I think it's very interesting to kind of play forward and think about, because there's book smart and then there's street smart, and the street smart is all experiential. It's actually doing the things that you learned about and putting to practice, and it's, you know, it's multifaceted, it's multidisciplinary, it's multidimensional, right, in terms of how we take our knowledge and do something good with it. And I just think it's very intriguing to think about, you know, what the MOOCs and what the technology platforms could enable in the future, just because I might be able to have my own personal professor. It might be actually somebody who's got artificial intelligence and understands different people's learning styles, and when I can't figure out a problem, because this is where like my best teachers and professors were helpful, was in the human interaction of being able to accelerate my learning or being able to apply, you know, a set of academic study facts to a real world situation. So I think it's very, I think you know, if we can do anything around, I didn't mean to bring up the cost savings because it's all about that, just more around, and I know the previous session was around, you know, investing. How do we make sure
Return on investment.
we invest in people's education development to get to a better end result, to have economic impact, you know, or good impact, whether we're all trying to do that as enterprises. And I just think it's a very, it's a very big potential area of value, you know, so I would encourage you to try to help people understand the economic value of those investments, even though it might be hard to track and difficult to quantify. I think it can get leaders' attention, you know, better to frame it in some of those terms.
I think what's going to drive MOOCs or the development of online education in the future is really the rising cost of a college education versus the return you get for completing that education. The fact that a lot of people in industry feel that school isn't necessarily preparing people for work. So there seems to be a disconnect between higher education and the skills needed for work, and MOOCs are looking to kind of fill that gap in between. So that's one aspect to take a look at. The book smart versus street smart is an interesting way of looking at it, right? There's knowledge, skills, and ability, and you have to have some basic knowledge to be able to develop your skills, and those skills feed into your abilities and what you can apply it to. And the higher you get on that, the more personal interaction you need, right? That becomes, especially in the leadership arena, you know, you can know how to do something, but then being able to apply it and use that to reach a goal is a very, very different approach to learning how to do that than just sitting down and watching videos or interacting with a course.
Yeah.
So I think adaptive learning technology, MOOCs, a lot of the online learning will give you that knowledge piece, right? Okay, I know what to do, but how you apply that then becomes where you need that social interaction, right? Where you need that, I have a project to do, I have a group to lead, I have something to accomplish, and that's where you need the professor, the instructor, somebody who can guide you past okay, you know what you're supposed to do, but okay, think about how you're going to apply that and have that dialogue back and forth.
Yeah.
It's kind of a rambling answer there, but I think there's two key pieces. Technology is going to be applied to education over the next 10 years. There's a big problem there that companies and very wealthy venture capitalists are looking to solve because it helps them in their business, right? There's a business case for it. And the second part is that's good, but it's not perfect. There's still going to be the role of somebody who can be instructor, guide, mentor, professor, whatever you want to categorize it. Yeah.
I think it's also, when you talk about the adaptive technology, you know, I think about how the nature of training and development professionals is changing. And so, you know, HR kind of always cycles through from generalist to specialist to generalist to specialist, you know, goes on forever. And so, you know, we saw a focus on training. So get your training and development people to be trainers. But now, since there's so many different ways to get learning, and MOOCs is just one of them, I'm seeing a shift back to kind of maybe learning coaches. So your training and development folks within the agency maybe aren't experts in standing up in front of the classroom because they can't be experts in everything that your staff needs to know. Instead, they're how do we pull from what's out there in the universe, MOOCs, you know, just one thing that's out there in the universe, to tailor it to what we need in the agency, and there's also that mapping to the agency goals. So, you know, when I sit down with executives and sell this, you know, they're thinking, what am I gonna get out of it? All right, well, you have specific performance targets in the strategic plan. You know, how's that going for you? You know, some are doing better than others. All right, what if we had if your leaders could do X, Y, Z better, would that help you with your performance targets? And so that's the way we're trying to map it, and I'm seeing that change among training and development professionals.
I want to also open up to the phone. Does anyone on the phone have a question? Anybody else in the room? Okay.
Greg had mentioned about MOOCs that,
Debbie, while you're waiting, just a thought on the question around ROI and so on. There's been a lot of research into whether online education is good or equal to traditional classroom education, and most of the findings are that it's about the same. So the outcomes in terms of learning are about the same, and I think Greg mentioned that there's no clear winner there. There is the consideration that high school students who learn online even outperform the most elite private school students in SAT and ACT scores. So that's sort of also on average across the country, obviously. That also kind of goes towards what Greg was saying in terms of book learning. So they might get better at book learning. The question is whether they're going to be nearly as competent socially and as leaders when they enter college and university if they work from home online during their high school years entirely. In the workplace, it's a little bit different. No one, I think, wants to replace all forms of learning with MOOCs or online education. They want to augment it. And so a person who needs something just in time, maybe performance reviews are coming up and they need a module on writing effective performance reviews for government. That's a perfect situation for a MOOC, especially an on-demand MOOC, that they can access just when they need it. So, I think Rhonda and Greg are saying too that the advantage of MOOCs isn't as a replacement, but as as something that augments. And when it augments well, the ROI can be, really very strong.
So, Greg had mentioned earlier that in terms of the non-completion rate, that sometimes students will get into the course and then after a few modules, they'll realize, well, this isn't what I signed up for. So I guess that raises a question for me as to what discussion has there been or creative ideas around a better facilitation of qualifying, a mutual qualification between the potential student and the course, as so you can have a better match, which may increase your full completion rate?
So there are a couple of ideas here, and that's, I don't think any of them are perfect, right? So there's the crowdsourcing part, which you can say, okay, people go out, start taking MOOCs, give us feedback. What do you think are the good MOOCs that are out there? And then if you collect that information and publish it, then some of the better MOOCs will bubble to the top. Then you also get a knowledge base that people can query and say, okay, I want to learn X. What's the best way to do that? The other is kind of the top-down approach, where you say, okay, what are our agency goals? What are the skills we want people to have? What are we trying to accomplish? And then go look for material that fits those particular goals. So it depends on who's driving, right? Is it the person who's looking for professional development and improving their skills, or is it from the top down where you're saying we've got a certain set of goals we need to reach?
Questionnaire or something.
Right.
And then you can say this is, and then the result might yield something like this course potentially has a 70% match to what you are looking
Right.
for, or 50, or 90, or what. So there's some sort of.
And that's part of the work that we're trying to do is, put together a survey for those people who do take MOOCs and say, okay, what can you tell us about this? And what did you learn? What did you find that was worthwhile? What was a waste of time? And try and collect that information and get that knowledge shared. The problem is, you know, you have a hard enough time getting people to fill out a peak form after a class, you know, where you're gonna get them to do it for an online course they took at home, right?
In their pajamas.
I don't have much to add. We're doing it a slightly different way just because we're starting with our executives. So when we're helping them do executive development plans, we have a template, and so they have to put in what exercises they're going to do, be it a detail, have a mentor, take a MOOC, whatever. And to get that plan approved, they don't have to have the plan approved, they can work it on their own, but to have that plan approved, their supervisor has to sign off, and then someone in HR actually is with them along the way, and we're reviewing the MOOC. So, you know, either we have some suggestions because we know of some, but we don't know, you know, we can't know the whole universe of MOOC. So if they decide to take one, they come back. They'll typically have the syllabus or at least the description of the course, and then we'll check with them and say, okay, how is this going to help you in your, you know, results-driven executive core qualification? And if we see a match, we say, okay, that seems to make sense. So that still doesn't get to the issue. They could still get into the class and say, oh, that's not what I thought it was, but at least there's some type of review, some type of check to.
Well, before
We have surveys after every online course, which about 20% typically complete, and then we get reports generated by the system when anyone takes a course online, and those are very detailed, and also have an evaluation at the end of them. But from those we can see exactly what they did and how long they spent on each element of the course, what score they got on the exam questions, you know, question by question, as well as their impression of the course. So adding that all together, we probably have about at least 10,000 of those individual feedbacks now. We're able to do things like plan our curriculum according to what people say they want, and also adjust our courses based on the feedback of what they like and don't like, as well as the difficulty and ease of the exam questions.
we're gonna wrap it up now. I just, all three have agreed to provide their contact information on their presentations, which you should have. So if you have additional questions for any of the presenters, you can contact them directly. And I just want to let everyone know that next month we're having a panel discussion on creative hiring and retention. And in March, we're going to have a panel discussion on candidate assessments as an effective recruiting strategy. So, thank you so much, Rhonda, Greg, and Alan. Thank you so much.